Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining.
Back at you with another episode of the Heat of Command podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how leadership and fear, how those two words do not correlate. We are in an industry where I think a lot of times we see a fear-based leadership style, that's not even a leadership style because we cannot lead utilizing fear. And I think sometimes that comes from a long line of tradition and what we think leaders need to be. And we want to squash some of those myths and really tell our audience why we think fear just does not work and it does not give us the results that we want. Even though the intention in our mind might be there, that these are the results we want, it just does not work out that way. So, we get to bring to you some experiences we face and hopefully bring some insight into you and get your brain thinking a little bit more on how we can better approach certain situations. So it's exciting to bring these experiences to you. And to all our listeners out there, if you have experiences that you're having trouble with and trying to navigate and leadership questions and things like that, please let us know. We love talking about this stuff. We don't always claim we have the right answers, but at least talking through it and keeping a conversation going, I think is very beneficial for all of us. And, we just need to keep it going and keep the progress going. So without further ado, we want to talk a little bit about fear and how fear has been used a lot of time in leadership roles to get results. And I'm guilty of it. And I've shared a lot of my past, my story on how I thought leadership should go. And I used to be that kind of fear monger and having people fear me and be scared of doing things right or wrong or this or that was, kind of my outlook. And going through a lot of life and shifting priorities, obviously that has changed drastically. And I know today that is not an effective way to lead. When we lead with fear, we do not get results. We create an atmosphere that becomes toxic and people are afraid to make decisions. And it goes beyond any of our goals that we're trying to achieve out there because we need a high level of composure. We need people to make quick decisions with confidence and understanding what they're going to do. And when you throw fear in there, we lose all of that. So it's one of those things that we have to constantly work at and kind of change our approach of what we think leaders need to be and how they need to approach things and just change our style on how we're doing things to get the results we want.
I have been frantically jotting down notes as you're speaking because it's so many things like I don't want to forget to talk about. This is such an interesting topic to me, and the fire service has grown and changed and evolved, some good, some bad stuff. But I can remember my first kind of roles in leadership roles, and I was a young fire instructor assigned to the fire academy and thinking that I needed to lead by a little bit of fear. And I'm 5'4", so I'm a short girl. And I remember one of my first times where I thought, because I was teaching in a fire academy. I was assigned to a fire academy that was a regional academy. So I was working with a lot of guys from other jurisdictions that didn't know me at all. So I really wanted to set myself I needed to show who I was, right? And so I remember standing on bleachers to be taller because I'm little so that I could yell at someone. And I'm pointing my finger, that whole rah, rah, rah at the fire academy. And I'm I've done it. Here I am, here I've done it. And I look back at that Kerry and this Kerry, and my approach now when I need to give feedback like that is so completely different. And that need to instill fear in someone else to get your point across, it just comes from a misunderstanding of how people work, because it just doesn't work like that for people. And I just finished listening to Extreme Ownership, Jocko and Leif, and a lot of people have listened to that book. And at the very, very end, they give an example of a guy from private sector who is running a business, and he keeps telling them, well, I want to lead like General Patton, and I want to be hold everybody accountable, and everybody it's a very fear-based style. And Jocko and Leif are like, that's not at all how that played out. That was not at all. That's not how the military actually operates. What you're speaking of is what's shown in movies, that people aren't robots. And, there's a lot of discussions and explaining the whys of things and a lot of training and all this stuff. But this guy had that same, I think, we get it in the fire service too, of this tough, what we think is a military style of leadership of just do as I say and shut the F up. Excuse, it's just how it kind of comes across sometimes, and it doesn't work. And every time I watch somebody try to do it that way, and I even remember back to when I was young in the fire service, the men or women that led me by fear, it made me so much worse at my job. And because all it does is strip away confidence, and you watch people, if you've been in the fire service a little bit, think about people in your organization that have supervisors that lead with fear, and then watch the progress of the people they're trying to improve their behavior. It gets worse and worse and worse because it strips your ability away to use your intuition, because you're second guessing, because every time the person that's in trouble is going, well, what would this person want me to do? And what if I don't do it the way they want me to do it? And what if I get yelled at again or screamed at again or punished again? Now they second guess everything they've learned. Their confidence is shot, and they just will continue to make mistakes over and over and over again. And that's not, if you want to build people to be really darn good firefighters, paramedics, or whatever your goal is, you have to build their confidence, not strip it away.
Yeah. A lot of times we take this approach, and I think a lot of times when people utilize that fear and want to be intimidating, they have this expectation that the people they're trying to be intimidating towards know what's going on or what they're supposed to be doing. And 9.9 times out of 10, they don't. And sometimes it's just as simple as telling them, and it's game over, instead of demeaning somebody, shaming somebody, and utilizing fear. And then we don't get the results we want. So this comes back from I kind of put a scenario out there, and by no means am I here calling anybody out. And again, I was there. I used to think this is what leadership was supposed to be, and I was wrong. I failed. And then, through these years, kind of constantly growing and learning and trying new things and still failing. So that's pretty awesome. But there's little successes along the way. So I was there, and I know these positions, and I know these type of people who are in these roles that can be effective leaders, but utilizing techniques like this just don't work. And I can say that from experience. They do not work. And it has a lot to say about yourself as a person, as a leader, as a professional, when you utilize those tactics. It says more about yourself than what you're trying to prove to somebody else. So, and the things we talk about, look in the mirror, introspection, self-awareness, and that's where your answers will be if you utilize those techniques. And that's the thing people don't want to do, but that's where the answers are. So the scenario, out hose testing, a couple companies out there hose testing, and one of our junior firefighters was working in the hose tower, helping somebody else put up hose. I was involved, kind of laying out more hose to get tested. And we had a more senior firefighter yell at the junior firefighter for not humping hose or not carrying hose throughout the whole morning of hose testing. Right or wrong, beyond the point. He wasn't sitting on his butt, but he was kind of helping somebody else and probably did not know any better, right? So he gets his butt chewed out, even though he was working. And the rest of the day, he shuts down. The rest of the entire shift, this young guy is shut down. And there's not much you could say to him to kind of change the course. The damage is already done. And you can do some damage control, sure, but the damage is already done. Fast forward, future shift, then there's people sitting around a table talking about how this young guy reacted. And I'm just sitting there like, I can't believe this. We approach a situation a certain way, and then we are going to talk about how somebody responded to that. Now, if that doesn't say that the problem is with you as an individual, then nothing else will, right? And again, this is a learning opportunity for everybody, for all our listeners, to everybody involved in this, for myself. It is a learning opportunity how to appropriately lead, how to, as a young person, understanding the aspects of the job and your expectations, and then we could just move on, and be happy. So, approaching this scenario in a different way is going up to that junior firefighter and be like, hey, can you just hump hose? That's what I want you to do. And I guarantee you it would have been end of story. Now, I know the arguments that'll come back, right? Well, he should have known that. He's the junior guy. There shouldn't be a lieutenant humping hose while he's doing that. Okay, let's get off our high horse a little bit. This is a guy that has never worked another job in his life. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in our industry today. They don't know. And if we don't tell them the expectation, if we don't show them the expectation, then they don't know. And everything that they think they're doing is right until they're told. And sometimes it's as simple as just telling them, hey, go hump hose, end of it. But instead, we're going to take this fear-based approach. We're going to shame an individual in front of a group, right? If we're going to discipline somebody, do it in private. And then to boot, we're going to talk about it in the following shifts on how they reacted. And that is just so counterproductive to saving lives because we're crushing somebody's confidence. We're crushing somebody's ability to think under pressure. We're crushing all these things that it takes for somebody to save a life. And again, I was there. I know that road, and it is just not an effective way to lead. And I know, there are many organizations out there across the country, across the world that still utilize this approach because we think this is how it's supposed to be, because we call ourselves a paramilitary organization. Well, I'm sorry, the military doesn't lead that way. We see things on TV and movies and think we need to be that way. We have this stigma in our head of how we're supposed to act. And real leadership is about everything else. It's not about that fear and the shame. It's about, okay, why doesn't this person know what they're doing? Sometimes it's as easy as telling them and we move on, right? But instead, when we use that fear and shame, you lose respect as a boss and a leader. People don't see you like that. They don't respect you. They fear you. So if you're a leader, do you want somebody to respect you or fear you? And I can hear in the back of my head right now, half the people saying, I'd rather them fear me. And it's like, you're not a leader. You're just a jerk. That's all you are. And what makes you think that you're better than anybody else? Just because it happened to you or you went through it or that's the way it was, we're becoming soft. Like I can hear it all. See, now I'm getting all riled up, Kerry. Hi. Man.
Stop.
So it's like, it's just so wrong in so many ways, and if we're trying to build better firefighters and better human beings, we just need to change our approach as effective leaders. And the fear and the shame just doesn't do it. And standing from kind of an audience perspective and watching all this transpire, you just see the detrimental effects it has on an individual and then on an organization. And then I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And then we can steamroll this down and start going down the mental health track, right? And we see this increase in suicides in our organization. And then you use fear and shame to try and quote unquote lead people. And then we wonder why people are committing suicide when you're utilizing shame and you continue to shame people and you don't get why they continually act the way they do. Because it's all out of fear. And if they're making decisions based off of fear, they're not the right decisions. And they're not the types of decisions you want these people making on firegrounds because they are more concerned about not making you upset than actually doing the job. And we can't train people that way. So yeah, this is a big thing. And I know it is in many, many, many organizations, and it's got to stop. It just has to stop. And we cannot lead this way because we are not, if you're doing that, you are not meeting the mission of the fire service. That is not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the way it was. And that is just not an effective way. You are not going to get anybody to progress if you utilize those strategies.
Yeah. And it's when I think of examples of when I've seen this happen, it's almost always, not 100%, but it's almost always when someone is in the eye of their brothers and sisters. So it's someone wants to show off, show other people, hey, look, I can hold this guy or girl accountable, and look how tough I am yelling at this person. And then when you get behind closed doors and you have to actually give feedback or constructive criticism to actually have some sort of behavior modification, people don't act like that. Because
Right.
if you're one-on-one, yeah, I very rarely see it happen behind closed doors in a private setting when you need to give feedback. But I almost always see it when you're in front of your coworkers and you're trying to show off. Like, look at me, look at me, look at how a badass I am. And I look at those people and I'm like, yeah,
No.
no, yeah, no,
You think
So
much different of yourself than the
yes,
perception of you.
like if I need to give feedback like that, I'm quieter. I, I I'm very serious when I give feedback, and I like to draw people in a little bit. So you really need to listen, and it's just so much more effective. Like I don't need to yell. If I'm quieter, a lot of times people are like, "Oh,
Yeah, right.
like okay, there's something serious about to happen here. Let me." But it's I just see that happen, and it's almost always in public that people act that way, and because they think they're demonstrating some superior leadership style, like, hey, look at me hold this person accountable. I'm like, no, that's not what just happened.
Right. You're showing some significant jerk style, right? When you're doing that. You've said a word a couple times I want to hit on. You've mentioned accountability. And yeah, everybody wants everybody to be held accountable. Sure, who doesn't? But it starts with you, and if you're throwing around that word accountability, I almost already have this image in my head of the people that utilize that word and try to push the responsibility away from themselves. And, they need to hold this person accountable and they need to hold this person accountable and we need to do this. And it's like, well, what about you? You're not perfect, right? We get this aura about us just because, one of the big things that used to bother me, and with so many young people, it really doesn't happen anymore. But this term leader or senior, and just because we've been on the job X amount of years, we automatically have this knowledge base and this and that. And sure, experience does teach us things, but that's not always the case, right? So when we're looking at these young people who are coming in, yeah, sure, they don't have the experience or the time on, but they could be extremely knowledgeable and beneficial to our organization. So when we look at our accountability, it's like you have to start with you. Are you holding yourself accountable? And again, you could go to most people and they say, yeah, I am. And it's like, are you really? And because the reality is actions speak so much louder than words. You can say whatever you want. You can call yourself whatever you want. You could call people whatever you want, but what are your actions behind it? So you can tell me you're accountable to yourself, but what are you really doing to show that? Right? Because that's the only way you're going to beat that kind of characteristic of being a jerk in the terms of leadership, right? And using fear and shame is you need to hold yourself accountable before anybody else. Every single day, it starts and ends with you. And when you're utilizing those tactics of fear and shame, that says a lot more about what you got going on in your life and in your mind than it does about anybody else. And it comes off as just bad, and for me, I just it's like I feel sorry for those people because they just don't know the other way, because we get in this industry and it's what we think it's supposed to be. And I'm here to tell you that is not the way. That is just not the way to use shame and fear. And it starts with you looking in that mirror and asking some tough questions and doing some real work, not just sticking behind, it's the job, it's the way it always was, I'm going to continue going down that road. And it's like, there's another one lost, right? We're just going to keep spinning our wheels and driving our industry in the same circular issues if we don't lose those types of characteristics, especially in those leadership roles.
Yeah, I love I love when people say we just need to hold people accountable. I'm like, okay, all right, let's play this game.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what would you like for to happen to this person or these people? It's always they, them, or these people or whatever. So I'm like, okay, what would you like in your perfect world? What would be holding them accountable? They're like, oh, they need to be written up. I'm like, Okay, did that change anything by writing them up? No, probably not. Has anybody had any conversations with them about their behavior or their what's going on? No, probably not, but you want me to write them up. Okay. I promise you, you do not want to work for an organization that uses write-ups and written discipline to fix accountability. I promise you, you don't want to work for those organizations because there's lots of them out there. And that is leading by fear. That is trying to change behavior by just writing people up is an attempt to lead by fear. And I promise you, nobody is out there going, I'm not going to do this thing because I don't want to get written up. They're not. That's not what drives people to make decisions or changes any behavior. And look at the organizations out there that have like points-based systems. So like you wreck something, you get these points, demerit points or whatever, or you're late, you get points. Horrible places to work. It just because you're constantly in fear of what's the next write up, what's this, what's that. And there's so much more out there to why, stuff goes wrong or people make decisions or whatever. And you have to change your culture a different way than that. That is not it. That is not it.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I've had some conversations with some captains that work with us that are like, well, we need a policy that says this because I can't hold my guy accountable because I don't have a policy that says he can't do this. I'm like, you're the captain. 100% you can hold him accountable. Have some conversations and set some expectations. But you don't want a policy that says thou shalt do this or thou shalt not do that, because then it takes your decision making and your critical thinking ability away.
Yeah.
Just do what's right. And if you need a policy for every single thing to say what your folks can and can't do, that's not leadership.
No.
That's fear. That's fear.
Yep. Yeah.
Yuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I can't agree more. And you look at, I don't know where I was going to go with that.
Sorry.
I was going to go somewhere.
No.
Totally lost my train of thought,
All
but
right.
that's all right. It's just good stuff, and we talk about how there are probably so many good people within every organization out there that have strengths in so many different areas, but we do a bad job of harnessing those strengths because they might not be typical to the culture, right? Or typical. I always talk about the firefighter box. They don't fit in the firefighter box that so many have defined as what we need to be. And there's so many talents and skills out there that we can take a hold of. And that's what makes an effective team, not everybody being the exact same, and to really harness those strengths, it takes a leadership approach that, provides an environment for people to learn and grow, and I really quickly want to say, if we're leading by fear and shame and we're trying to be tough, you're failing. Now, if we're leading by words like empathy, self-awareness, compassion, we can be very tough. And a lot of times it's like a word jungle, right? We can mix and match words however we want. But the reality is, if you want to be a tough organization, that is fine. Like, yes, we need to be tough on our people. The job we are called to do is extremely challenging, especially the older you get, learning that, right? Both physically, mentally, all of it, right? It is challenging. And I'm not saying don't be tough. We need to be tough. I get it. We need to have attention to detail. Absolutely. Right? We need to have this awareness of self, of everything happening around us. We need to know these things. So I'm saying be tough, but you are not going to be tough by utilizing fear and shame. That is not tough. That is just being a jerk, and you are not going to get the results desired. We cannot have people working off of fear. We need them to be confident and competent. And if they're not, have your strategies in place to provide the training they need. And if they're not meeting standards, have things in place to remove people from the industry. I just talked to a bunch of cadets and I said, openly in this room, everybody in this room, hey, this job might not be for some of you, and that's okay, right? But effective leadership can have, the ability to say that to somebody, but go there with, hey, I think this might work out for you. Or we all know a lot of people, hey, why don't you try this? I think this is where you can fit. Obviously, after courses of actions have been taken, but set people up for for success, not failure, and be tough. That's okay. Like, yes, I totally get it. But I think a lot of times my definitions of toughness and other people's are so opposite, and standards and that accountability and all that matters. But our understanding of those words are just so skewed in this day and age that it's so hard to try and change that thinking around to kind of what we talk about.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought all, that's exactly what I was going to bring up it is there is still the need and the necessity to have a very high standard, very high expectations, but not by shaming someone or scaring them to death. That's not how that happens. And our organization and I can speak for myself personally, like I'm tough. Like I have very tough expectations and I'm very particular about a lot of things but I'm not going to scare you into doing it, and like you said, it's so important to mention that this job is not for everyone. And we are well aware of that. And that's so we're not saying, you know, hold everybody's hand and sing kumbaya. This is not a club. This is not Kiwanis. This is not 4-H or Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. And so there is times, and I've had those times as a supervisor where you have to have a conversation with somebody about leaving the organization, but you can't scare them into doing that. You have to do that. Why would I think about if your sister or brother, husband or wife, son or daughter was working somewhere and needed to leave? Would you want them to quit because they're scared? Or would you rather them work for a supervisor that had enough self-awareness to come and say, hey, let's talk through some of these mistakes that are going on and some performance stuff, and I'm sure you're aware that this has been going on, and let's find a solution which may be outside of the fire service. And it makes it's easier on you as a leader because it feels a lot better to do it that way. And it's just being a good human being.
Yeah.
It just really is. It really is.
Yeah, in the back of my head, I also, I hear that. Well, if they can't handle that kind of stress, then they don't belong in the fire service. And it's like, well, no, like fear and shame are totally different, right? And we've talked in the past on how a lot of people who come into our industry come from some type of broken past, and we can talk about identity and purpose and all that stuff. And, I think sometimes we get a lot of people in our industry, myself included, right? You come to and take a job like this because it gives you some type of, it does give you some identity, right? And gives you a purpose. And, if you battled with, I characteristics of shame your whole life through your childhood and then you come here, yeah, it gives you some kind of different outlook. Whether that's healthy or not, that's a whole nother episode that we could talk about. But if you're then, adding to that problem, then we're not doing anything for anybody. And we're making everything worse. We're not making anything better. And let's just say that person who you utilize fear and shame and they leave the organization, or they don't stop being, or they stop being a firefighter. Did we do our job? Is that weeding somebody out? I don't think it is, right? They just didn't want to deal with a jerk for all I know, right? And they're smart enough to leave. Like, good for you, and in this day and age, these young people have opportunities to go to any fire department they want to. So they can find an organization where they're going to be motivated and encouraged to succeed instead of utilize shame and fear. And it's like, what are we doing? And it just, a lot of times it just boggles my mind. And I guess it boggles my mind so much because I was there, and whatever I went through to kind of flip my script, it just brought a whole different light to my life and to everything. And I just, it's almost like I don't understand how people could be that way, yet I was that way, And it's like, now I'm just like, I don't get it, And the hard part for me, I think a lot of times, is just people don't want to listen to anything I have to say. Fine. In terms maybe of my own organization. And then that's cool. But it's like, just learn from my experiences. I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. That's the whole thing of me and you going out and speaking and doing this. It's like, don't do it. Like, I did it. don't. It's not good. Like, I'm telling you, don't do it because it's not worth it. It creates a stress on you. You're deflecting all your insecurities off of yourself onto somebody else. That's what you're doing. And
Yep.
until you can look in that mirror, man, it is just not going to change. And I guess it's just frustrating because it doesn't need to be that way. And for everybody involved, and a lot of people have so much potential in these leadership roles, but they're just doing what they think the fire service is or what happened to them. And it's like, no, you can change your ways, and then that kind of steamrolls into the second issue. If for me, especially, you're midway through your career and you try to do these changes and stuff, and it's just not, nobody gives you the time of day, right? It's just me being me and this and that. And you have to overcome those struggles as well. And it's like, just don't do it. Don't do it. And if you're young in your career, I'm telling you, don't do it. Give people a chance. Help them learn and grow and be there for each other, right? We talk about brother and sisterhood, and it's like, do you yell? You're right. Do you yell like that at your kids? No, you encourage and motivate them. You give them a path to succeed. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, what we should be doing, right? Like take that mentality, especially for these new people coming in because they don't know anything else. They're still living at home. They've never worked a job in their life. Like, give them a chance. Teach them, train them. Don't be a jerk, but you still can be tough, right? I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe I'm just maybe we're talking all craziness and we're way off the mark here, Kerry. I don't know. Sometimes I feel that way.
Well, at least it gets it off our chest.
Yeah,
right? I don't even there's 0 people listening to us, but
it's like our weekly therapy session. That's all it is, right?
It is. Well, I'm glad we had this talk today because you got me fired up about it. And I think to end this on a positive note, I taught a abbreviated version of the class we teach we have acting captains. So if you want to sit in the seat of the company officer, if the company officer's off, you go through a 6-month program of mentoring and a task book, and you have to attend some in-house classes that we do. And so I did a leadership class for them. And this last group that I just did, they're young, and we did a values exercise, and they're like circling and crossing off values, and we're talking about values, and like so many of them, like their real personal values were empathy and kindness. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what just happened? It was just, and they just really seemed like what I was saying was like, to them was like, duh, like
Yeah.
the stuff we preach about, they were like, well, of course.
Yeah.
And it was just very, very refreshing that there was no like animosity. Cause sometimes we get pushed back about this is safe space stuff. This is too soft or whatever. You're making the fire service soft. And they were like, oh no. And they had examples, and they were very self-aware. And it was just really, it was so invigorating to me, but
yeah, I definitely think we're seeing some good changes and some progress there. And I think the young people, they get it, and that's the type of environments they want. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think like, talking about this stuff, we all, especially as leaders and as professionals, like there is always something for you to work on, me to work on, all of us to work on, right? We are not great at a lot of things, and that's fine. And we're bad at a lot of things. But I challenge you to figure out what those things are that you're bad at and go work on them and find the people that are going to help you fix those. And if it is that leadership style, find the people who, are going to mentor you to be an effective leader and be a respected leader, not a feared leader, right? Leaders should not be feared. If you're feared, you're not a leader, right? Period. End of story on that. But there's just so much opportunity for growth every single day of our lives, all the way until we're 6 feet under, right? And, it's taking that opportunity. And as we continue on our career, it's, protecting ourselves from getting that chip on our shoulder. Well, I've been here this long, so I'm good, and it's constantly improving your ability to work with other human beings, different generations, people who think different than you, people who don't fit in that firefighter box. Because like I said, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And the goal is to harness all those strengths, and it takes really effective leadership. And it's a lot of work. It just doesn't come with time. It doesn't. It's all dependent on the amount of work that you want to do on you, and holding yourself accountable, and looking in the mirror, and don't worry about everybody else until you are perfect. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not perfect, and you'll never be perfect, right? So there's always work that you can do on yourself, and start there. And again, just to reiterate, you can be tough. We're not saying don't be tough, be extremely tough, but just that approach, right? Just look at that approach and don't be a jerk, right?
Boom, mic drop. Don't be a jerk.
Boom, that's it.
Yeah. So before we wrap this up, one last quick note. I want to acknowledge there's a ton of first responders out, the task force and IMT teams from the Hurricane Helene that hit. So thoughts and prayers out to all of the citizens and first responders in western part of Virginia and in North Carolina that are just dealing with some horrific stuff. So we're thinking of you guys, and also everybody in Florida, this hurricane coming your way. So everybody be safe out there.
All right. Yeah. So that's another week down for the Heat of Command podcast. Like I said, as we opened up, we like talking about experiences and scenarios and stuff, and let us know what you think and things that you got going on, maybe in your organizations or other places, or things that you've seen. And we'd be glad to chat about it and kind of give our input. So until next week, we'll see you next time. As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
and Kerry
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.